Hello there. I thought I'd do another video quickly because a report has just come out and it was filed at 8 p.m. and it's in the Telegraph newspaper. It's by Sarah Napton, who did the previous one not so long ago. She's the science editor and it's a really good article. It's titled Lucy Letby's hospital unit was, and in quotes, accident waiting to happen. I'll put the link below to the non-paywall version so you don't need to, you can get past the paywall. I'll put that link below in the description bar. So the subheading is Countess of Chester employees wrote to NHS Trust warning of their, quote, grave concerns, close quote, about unsatisfactory staffing levels on neonatal unit. This article covers some things that we've discussed in previous videos, probably many times, but there's some new stuff in terms of going back a little bit further, and also the changes in the levels of the nurses that they had there in terms of their training. And there's some other really interesting information there as well in terms of somebody who used to work there. So it's adding quite a lot, and it's very well written, I think. So I'll read through it. So this has come out today, 24th of August, 8 o'clock this evening. And so I'll just read through it, and I hope it will be of interest to anyone who has been following this story, this miscarriage of justice. The Countess of Chester baby unit, where Lucy Letby worked, was an accident waiting to happen, in quotes. After a decade of redundancies, resignations and cuts, it has been claimed. Last August, Lucy Letby was convicted of the murders of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 others at the hospital's neonatal unit in 2015 and 2016. A retrial earlier this year found her guilty of the attempted murder of another child known as Baby K. However, in the years leading up to the deaths, nurses had written to the NHS Trust warning of their, quote, grave concerns, close quote, about unsatisfactory staffing levels on the neonatal unit, which were 30 to 40% lower than the guideline levels. A letter signed by 12 senior nurses, written in 2004, so that goes back quite a long way. That's some 7 to 8 years before Lucy Letby started there even. I think she started at the beginning of 2012, I think, but she did some of her, last part of her degree training there and in other places around the area, but I think she actually started on that unit in 2012. But this letter goes back to 2004, which warned of, quote, continual excessive workload, which, quote, is causing serious concerns about the increased risk of clinical incidents. That's back in 2004. I'm just going to break in here a little bit, or in terms of, some people have said, along the road actually, they've said, well, was it always a level 2? When did it start off as a level 1, and when did it rise to a level 2? This has come up periodically now and again, with some people saying that, or believing that it was sometime in 2014 it rose to a level 2 from a level 1. But the earliest I can find in terms of documentation of being a level 2 unit, so that's being able to take, babies at an intensive care level of less, between 27 and 35 weeks. So with a very high acuity there. Goes back to a document that is dated 2011, in which that's a kind of national document in which it lists all the neonatal units across the country, and under the COCH, Countess of Chester Hospital neonatal unit, they got level 2 there in 2011. What the status was before that, I can't say, but I can't find any anything explicit which says that it was a level 1, then a level 2, and then back to a level 1 again. We know when it went back to a level 1, and that's in July 2016. And they accepted that downgrading. Probably, yeah, well, I was going to say because of the intervention of the RCPCH, but it's not as clear as that, is it? Because the RCPCH didn't actually visit until September 2016, but it was a management decision to go back to a level 1. Well, I say go back to. Was it ever a level 1? I don't know. We know it was certainly a level 2 back in 2011. But, and here's the interesting thing, if Lucy Letby had been, as she was, removed in July 2016, the RCPCH report hasn't reported yet, hasn't even visited in order to do their report. The actual report gets back to the hospital the following year in February. Why? I mean, I suppose the management said, well, because we've had this high spike in deaths, we should err on the side of caution, or whatever the reason was given. What was the explicit reason that they did that? But it's reasonable to infer that they considered that things had gone wrong from a systemic point of view, as opposed to from a point of view of having an alleged serial killer there, and at that point there's no police involvement. So it was a management explicit or explicit management acknowledgement that there's something systemic having gone wrong there over the last 2 years because of this spike in deaths, that they knew that there was something wrong, and that's why they reduced the level to a level 1 from 2. And they've never put it up since. They've never, in the last 8 years, it hasn't gone back up, has it? And that tells you something else. I mean, these points, I know we've talked about them numerous times, but it's just, I thought it's worth repeating in the context of this new article here. Okay, so back in 2004, just to recap, there's a letter from 12 senior nurses saying, they've got serious concerns about an increased risk of clinical incidents. The quote goes on from this 2004 letter: "It is a constant worry that working in such a compromised setting could increase the risk of unintentional professional negligence," they warned. Then there's a next section which is headed "Further Cuts Made." Further cuts made. Despite the concerns, further cuts were made in the following years, including the loss of 2 advanced neonatal nurse practitioners, and the short form of that is ANNP for short, or, quote, super nurses. So they're nurse practitioners known as super nurses, who had been employed to take on some of the roles of junior doctors. Michelle Warden, an ANNP, advanced neonatal nurse practitioner, at the unit, who had worked in the NHS for 28 years, was made redundant in 2007. Again, that's 5 years before Lucy Letby even got there, after refusing to be downgraded amid ongoing cost-cutting and restructuring at the unit. So this is really delving into the backstory of what happened there in terms of how the level of qualified staff was reduced and cut back and back and back, and it goes on more here. She told the Telegraph, this is Michelle Warden, quote, "The hospital said they would no longer need ANNPs because they would not be caring for really sick babies." Right, so that's in 2007. "At the time I told management that was ludicrous, but it fell on deaf ears." There's nothing explicit being said here that it was a level 1 at this point in 2007. We just don't know. It's just not made explicit. And as I say, the furthest back I can find is this report from 2011 where it's shown as a level 2. But she's given this rationale that they're not going to be taking care of really sick babies. Michelle Warden goes on to say, "I told them I told them that you cannot run a neonatal intensive care unit with no senior nursing staff. Well, that you can then infer from what she just said there that it was a level 2 unit, because she's calling it an intensive care unit, which it is not now. As a level 1, it's not an intensive care unit in that sense. So it must have been a level 2 unit back then. Although they're not explicitly saying it, I think it's a safe inference to make. Michelle Warden goes on to say, this is an accident waiting to happen. Oh my God, that she uses the same phrase almost, or the same vibe really, that Alison Timmis does in 2015, so some 8 years later, about accident waiting to happen, that bad things are going to happen. This is an accident waiting to happen. This is what Michelle Warden told the management. But they were not interested, so the management weren't interested, close quotes. By 2011, we're getting up to just the year before Lucy formally starts as a nurse on that unit. By 2011, I think that's her last year of training, if I remember correctly, 8 registered nurses had left the unit, and 8 unregulated nursery nurses were employed to plug the gap. Good Lord. So we know it's a level 2 unit at this point, and they're nothing against nursery nurses at all, but they're obviously not qualified to look after these very high acuity babies. And that's from 2011 onwards. 8 unregulated nursery nurses were employed to plug the gap. See, what's happening now is that everything's coming out, the whole history, and people are, certainly if they've retired, they're feeling willing to speak because they sense. I mean, the ending of this article is very, very powerful in what is said, but I won't say it before it happens. 8 unregulated nursery nurses were employed to plug the gap. The following year, the hospital employed 2 nurses straight out of university, one of whom was Lucy Letby. Exactly, she starts in 2012. At the time, Ms. Warden wrote to the Chester Chronicle, repeating her concerns about the unit. During my final year at the Countess of Chester Hospital, I was appalled to observe the decimation of the nursing and midwifery service, she wrote in the newspaper. The quote goes on. The decision to dramatically increase the ratio of unqualified to qualified has forced those unqualified staff into performing, or rather attempting to perform tasks beyond their capabilities. She goes on to say, the repercussions of all this for the depleted numbers of qualified staff, excuse me, and untimely, I'll say that again. So it's a continuation of the quote. The repercussions of all this for the depleted numbers of qualified staff and ultimately for their patients is profoundly worrying, close quote. Around 2013 to 2014, junior trainee paediatricians from the School of Medicine at Liverpool University were also pulled from the unit, further depleting medical staff. The situation had not improved by 2015, and in December of that year, Dr. Alison Timmis, who we've talked about a lot before, a paediatrician, emailed Tony Chambers. We've covered this, but it's interesting to see it come up here because it's a real timeline of what's happened. Dr. Alison Timmis emailed Tony Chambers, the hospital's chief executive, reporting that staff were in tears because they were being forced to look after more babies than they could safely accommodate. Now there's a quote here from Alison Timmis. They get upset as they know that the care they are providing falls below their high standards, end quote, she said. Warning nurses were, quote, chronically overworked and felt, quote, no one is listening. The quote goes on to say, at several points we ran out of vital equipment such as incubators. This is a level 2 unit. We ran out of vital equipment such as incubators. She added, quote, this is not an exceptionally busy week. This is not an exceptionally busy week, so I guess this is now our normal working pattern, and it is not safe. And it is not safe, she said. So when she's saying it's not an exceptionally busy week, she's saying, well, if it is a busy week, it's even worse then, isn't it? That's the point she's making. The quote continues from Alison Timmis, Dr. Alison Timmis. Things are stretched thinner and thinner and at breaking point. When things snap, the casualties will either be children's lives or the mental and physical health of our staff. Close quote. So I'll just interject there. Yes, it was children's lives, and it was one of their best nurses being accused of crimes that were not crimes at all, that were the responsibility of the hospital trust and all the medical failures, principally from the doctors there, and the obviously the failings as the unit of the unit as a whole, in terms of the staff levels. They weren't capable of running. They weren't capable to run as a level 2 unit, as has been said many times, and has been said by people with medical training. Dr. McLachlan being one of them, and Dr. McConville another. Okay, the next section is titled Perfect Storm. At the trial, it was said that Lucy Letby capitalised on the difficulties faced by the neonatal unit to target her victims and request more shifts, so she could have more time to carry out her killing spree. How perverse is that? So they'll move away from the reality of what's happening there and just say, well, she's capitalised on it. It's just sick. It's sick beyond measure that they've done that, you know. Look, as we've said many times in other videos, and other people have said, you know, you take away all these, take away the deaths that Lucy Letby was blamed for and causing intentional harm, and you've got up to 12, possibly more other deaths that have happened, but they're not bothered about those. They don't want the jury to see anything about those. Evans just blithely whips through all those and just says they're all expected and all explainable, as though that's a normal year, but in and of itself that's an increase. So there's something fundamental going on there. Obviously, it's just so obvious. There can't be anyone eventually that won't be able to see what's happened here and what they've done. Coming to the end now. But Ms. Warden said the mortality spike seen at the Countess of Chester neonatal unit during 2015 and 2016 could be explained by a perfect storm of poor staffing and other problems on the unit. Well, exactly, of course. And that's what Alison Timmis warned about. And that's what other nurses were talking about back in 2004, and then again in 2007, wasn't it? So this has been going over years and years before Lucy Letby even was employed as a nurse on that unit. Goes on to say here, last few paragraphs, the hospital had struggled to get rid of a dangerous bacteria which had colonised taps in the neonatal unit. We did a video about that, didn't we? I did a video about it. I mean, I know lots of other people have as well, based on a recent report in the Telegraph as well, which had colonised, by the same writer actually as this one, I believe, colonised taps in the neonatal unit, dangerous bacteria which could be lethal, and certainly has been lethal to other babies in other hospitals, as was discussed in that previous report, during the period when deaths spiked, and there was a problem with raw sewage entering the ward from poor plumbing. Ms. Warden said, quote, there were always problems with the sinks being blocked, and that's historically. So we're talking about, you know, well over a decade here. One year there was an outbreak of tiny black insects and they had to get an exterminator in to remove them. She continues the quote, "They were short-staffed, too many inexperienced nurses, too few rounds by consultants." I'll just interject there. In the period in question, 2015-2016, there was, I think there was 2 ward rounds a week, or 1 or 2 a week. I can't remember. I'm forgetting some of the details, but it was a very absolute minimum. I think there were 2 a week. But as other doctors have said, Dr. McConvert, there should have been at least 1 a day, if not 2 a day. But there were 2 a week. So there we have it, Not enough, too few rounds by consultants. I mean, for the large part of of 2015, Ravi Jayaram's not there. I mean, you look at his Facebook; he's elsewhere all the time. He's shooting He's shooting the Born Naughty series that he was in. He's going to jollies here, there, and everywhere, appearing on morning TV. He's one of the main consultants there, and he's hardly there for all that time. He's just not there. You can see it. He's not there. He's in other parts of the country. He's not there. And then Gibbs isn't there very much, according to other reports. And they got lots of very inexperienced junior doctors there who don't know what they're doing, understandably, and they need senior cover, and they don't have it. They don't have it. So sorry, I'm keep interjecting here, but they were short-staffed. This is Ms. Warden, who continues her quote here. They were short-staffed, too many inexperienced nurses, too few rounds by consultants, and a culture of not seeking help when they were out of their depth. It all came together to create a perfect storm. That not seeking help when they're out of their depth is something that the RCPCH report picked up as well. She goes on to say, Ms. Warden, even Lucy Letby, who was deemed to be a senior nurse, had only been qualified for 3 years. That's right, between 2012 and 2015. You can't run a unit, Ms. Warden continues, without qualified staff. It was a drip, drip, drip effect. Close quote. Speaking of Lucy Letby's conviction, she added, quote, I am so sad about the deaths and collapses of babies since I left, whether those in 2015 and 2016 or otherwise. She continues, however, I also now feel that Countess of Chester did me a favour by making me redundant. I was the senior nurse, and I was always with the sickest babies. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Close quote. And it's clear what she means by that, isn't it? It's clear what she means. There's a bit more, actually. Yeah, so I thought that was a very powerful statement. And I think it's very easy to infer what she means, what she feels about what's happened to Lucy Letby, that she's been scapegoated. I believe it's very, very reasonable to infer that, logical to infer it. And she felt that had she been there, she could have been the one that was scapegoated, and may well have been. I'll just finish it off now, the last few paragraphs. An investigation by the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, RCPCH, found that between 2015 and 2016, there were organisational and environmental issues with the ward and major issues with understaffing, but the report was never shown to the jury. That's abysmal. So where are the defence? Where's the defence not getting that report? Were they not aware of it? Was it held back from them? Was it held back from them? Or did they have it? They just didn't think it was important? Of course it is important, vitally important. Either way, something bad has gone wrong there. Something bad has gone wrong there if that defence hasn't either had sight of it or had knowledge of it. Did the hospital keep it? Keep that information, that knowledge from the defence team? Deliberately pull it back from both sides because it knew it would help the defence? Or, just as bad in a different way, did the defence know about that RCPCH report and just decide, in the same way that they decided not to call Professor Mike Hall, oh, we don't need that? Why? Why would you not do that? Why would you not call Professor Mike Hall if you knew about the RCPCH report? Why would you not bring that in as part of the defence? If the NHS Trust deliberately kept that report away from the defence for reasons of self-protection in some way, then I think that should amount to perverting the course of justice, I believe. That's what I believe. Last couple of paragraphs. The RCPCH review team, so they came in September 2016, 10 weeks after Lucy Letby had been moved to the admin job. The RCPCH review team found serious concerns with the unit, uncovering a pattern of, quote, insufficient senior cover and a reluctance to seek advice, as I was saying earlier, close quote, from consultants. Insufficient senior cover and a reluctance to seek advice from consultants. Well, sometimes because they just weren't there. They weren't there. You know, Jai Arams, the lead, was the lead paediatrician, and he wasn't there. I mean, certainly for the first, he's hardly there. Oh, he's doing. You can see him playing with his band, and you can see him doing triathlons. You can see him appearing on about 4 or 5 or 6 different TV shows, and then filming those shows, and then going to awards and stuff like that. Where's he got time to actually do this job? I mean, his Facebook was set, as you'd imagine from a narcissist. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say that because mine's set the same. But it's set to completely public, so you can go and look. You can go and look and see what was happening in 2015. It takes a bit of scrolling back, and you can just see all these posts are about being in anywhere but the hospital. That first half of 2015, anywhere else but the hospital. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, reviewers warned, that's the reviewers from the RCPCH, warned that senior doctors should have been more available, yeah, you're telling me, given the vulnerable nature of the premature babies on the ward, while the number of nurses on the unit was frequently less than the recommended levels. There was a 21% shortfall in nurses between 2014 and 2015, and agency staff were often drafted in to plug the gaps. The RCPCH report also recommended that 2 advanced neonatal nurse practitioners, those ones from before, ANNP, nurses, be employed at the unit. An inquiry led by Lady Justice Thirlwall is due to look into issues at the hospital and will begin next month, so that's September. Final paragraph. A spokesman at the Countess of Chester Hospital NHS Foundation Trust said, quote, due to the ongoing police investigations and the pending public inquiry, it would not be appropriate to answer or provide advice on the questions asked at this time. It's their standard reply and has been to various Freedom of Information requests. It's just all they're going to say at the moment. I think they realise that the narrative is in the process of changing, and in quite a fundamental way. It has already changed. But there's a lot more to do, of course, and this article is very, very strong. As I hope you may agree, there's some very strong points here, and going back historically as to how dangerous it was actually for very, very premature high acuity babies in that unit. Thank you very much for listening, and take care. All the best. Have a nice bank holiday if you're in the UK. Bye-bye.